Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Exercise is Bullshit. I'm your host, Logan Herlihy. I'm so excited to be joined today by the Mr. Minimum Dose. Few sets as possible, bigger with smaller volume, Mr. Pack himself, Dr. Pack, Patrocles Androulakis Korakakis. I'm sure I screwed that up again.
Hey, no, you didn't.
As you always did. That was pretty good. Yeah, I've been practicing. Awesome. Say hi, Pack, man. It's so good to see you, buddy.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I'm here to finally bust the myth of exercise and tell you it's bullshit. Big Pharma has been lying to you all along. And yeah, we'll see you at the voting we'll see you at the ballots. America, you know what to do.
Well, the kind of the premise behind this with exercise is bullshit is we're going with sort of a triple entendre based on one of my favorite rappers of all time, obviously Jay-Z, with the triple entendre, and our we've got BS, we've got bullshit, and then right now the working acronym is BROS, obviously us, utilizing logical lifting and science-based heuristics to inform training. So we'll see if we can inform anyone's training today. We're definitely bros. We're definitely using some heuristics. There might be some science here. But for listeners that have never heard of you, Pack, which I'm sure is few and far between because you're absolutely blowing up on the YouTube, on the igrams, basically everything Google owned. Why don't you tell us a little bit of your background? Give us sort of the abridged version of how you got into strength training, how you became quite so jacked, and how you became Dr. Pack.
Cool. I love how you went from however old you are to 98 years old by saying the I-grams. I know it was on purpose, so that was great. So yeah, my name is Pack. My actual name is Patrocles Androulakis Korakakis, P-A-K.
That's pretty close. I was pretty dang close that time.
You got the surnames fully right. The first one, I mean, I guess Patrocles as well, maybe a right pronunciation. I don't know.
So it's Patroclos. Patroclos.
Yeah. In more, but I don't know if the name transfers in an English pronunciation, if that makes sense. You know, the same way Winston Churchill in Greek is slightly different to the original. Anyways, what are we saying now? So my name is Pack. I have my PhD from Solon University on the minimum dose required to increase strength in power lifters specifically. I am a researcher at the Applied Muscle Development Lab in New York City. Lehman College, New York City, a visiting scholar, actually. So it's not that I live in NYC. I'm there relatively often now. I do research on all things lifting. I love lifting, anything that has to do with strength, hypertrophy. And professionally, I'm also a coach for StrongerByScience.com and the chief editor of Reps Research Review. As far as how I got into training, I started lifting when I was around the age of 16-ish with a friend back in school. Fell in love with the iron, got the iron bug, then got into strength training, tried to do a bit of powerlifting, started enjoying reading about lifting more, did a degree, then got into research and the PhD. But overall, I'm somebody who absolutely loves everything that has to do with lifting weights, getting jacked, getting stronger, but also lately I've been really interested in just getting more people to lift and the general health benefits of lifting. That's more not in my own research, but that's more of my own sort of reading interest that has grown over the years.
On that note, have you seen that new paper that just came out? Stu Phillips was one of the co-authors, a bunch of other authors on there that was talking about the coming of age of resistance training.
Yeah. So that was... It had what was the title? I was looking at the
coming of age of resistance training is a primary form of exercise for health.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll try to remember to put a link to that in the notes for this podcast. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, Stu is just the GOAT. I think he does such a good job of really taking complex topics and trying to make them really understandable for the layperson, but he's so knowledgeable as well. So I think, a great mission to really try to get strength training to as many people as possible. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do at Stronger by Science, a little bit more about your coaching, just in case anybody's interested in working with the GOAT.
We're full. We're full.
Okay. Oh, obviously. So he's on the wait list. So if you want to get on the wait list, you can. I know that Pack loves Rolexes. So if you send him a Rolex,
I was about to make the I was about to make the analogy with the Rolex weightlist. No, I'm joking, obviously, but I don't want to spend too much time promoting myself. I'm really ready to dive into.
Yeah, and I want to dive into,
nitty-gritty.
because I know it's late there and I'm sensitive to your time. The one thing I do
I'm
want to
chilling.
touch on though, yeah, the one thing I do want to touch on though, because I think it's important for listeners, I think it's important for practitioners, I think it's important for anybody who's interested in exercise in general, is reps. I think it is probably the most important publication going on a regular basis in our industry right now. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? What it is, what it stands for, what you guys are actually doing in each of those monthly magazines, and really give that a plug, because I found it so invaluable to my own learning.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I will counter against the most valuable publication in our
For the layperson, I think it does a really
for
good
the
job.
layperson, it's definitely
But-
a valuable
But
publication.
somebody who doesn't know how to look on PubMed, right? Who's clicking on Layden
Sure,
Norton's links on all of his posts and stuff, right? I think
Okay.
something that's approachable. So you don't.
You're a better salesman. You're a better salesman than me. It's the best. It's the best thing since sliced bread. But in all seriousness, Reps is a research review where we take 5 studies that are relevant to individuals who like to engage in resistance training, fitness, who love lifting and love taking care of their training, their nutrition, and they're interested in learning more about training, nutrition, supplementation, and in general, the science around lifting. And again, nutrition and supplementation. And what we do is we take 5 studies, usually new studies, but there are the odd issues here and there where we do take some all-time classics as well. And we break the studies down in a very simple to understand way, in just layman English. And there's no formal education in sports science required, no education in statistics or anything like that. And we essentially break each study down, what the researchers did, some background, obviously, what they found, and how what they found fits with the rest of the literature, how you can take those findings away and what they mean for you in practice. As it stands, we've covered over 70 studies in a plethora of issues, and as if you're somebody who just wants to keep up with the latest science in an easy way, Reps is a great resource. Obviously, there are other research review offerings out there for people that may have those, may have that academic background and want something much heavier, lengthier, and more complex. There's plenty of other solid research reviews for that audience. But for the average person who just wants to download Reps every month, read about 5 new studies and be up to date with some of the latest stuff, it's an excellent option.
Dominate the conversation at Thanksgiving and around the holidays of you having basically your unofficial PhD, courtesy of Dr. Pack and Leyden Norton. No, I just really enjoyed, all the, I don't mind reading actual studies, and I like going through and interpreting some stuff, but it's just nice to have sort of the abridged version and to pull out what you want, and then to know that you can go back. And I love that you guys are so cautious with interpreting things, and you really, make a point of saying like, hey, this is kind of what they found, interpret this cautiously because of the sample size, or we could probably, it was a meta-analysis. We've looked at, 3,000 participants that were grouped in here. So I just think it's a great place to start if maybe you've thought about reading some research, but you just feel a little daunting there. So give us a little abridged version of your background. You mentioned a minimum dose a few times. Give me like the 30-second elevator pitch of how you're a PhD, and then talk to us just a little bit about some of the recent work you've been doing. I know you've been doing some work in deloads, minimum dose. What's going on at Lehman in the sports science lab? And then we'll kind of get into today's topic.
It seems like I'm heavily promoting this is like the Dr. Pack promo podcast.
Hey, we're working on the format here, okay? And
thank you. So, and it's great. It's really cool to be on a podcast, and it feels so comfortable because I'm just having a nice chat with a good friend. So the elevator pitch is my PhD was on the least a powerlifter needs to do to get stronger. Obviously, that included looking at the literature in general around the minimum dose for strength for trained individuals. A handful of sets per lift per week seems to be more than enough. So for sets of 1 to 5 repetitions, or 5 to 12 if you're doing non-powerlifting work. as long as you're doing a few relatively heavy sets, very closer to failure per week, you can make meaningful strength gains for at least 3 months, potentially even more. And based on the literature for muscle growth, you may also make some gains as far as muscle mass goes. So that's the PhD as a whole. As far as research projects coming out of Lehman, we have a narrative review that we're working on exercise technique. I think this is probably the first paper to touch on exercise technique directly, which is weird.
Saying what exactly?
Exactly. So it's crazy. Once you go down the rabbit hole, it's one of those rabbit holes where you're like, wait, don't we have an official definition of exercise technique and what that actually means and what are the components? But like a paper directly looking at
James, for a long time, we're looking into what is failure and like what is intensity and how do we define those things. And it's still, to me, pretty obscure and kind of all over the place. But what does that look like? What kind of things are you guys trying to source out there?
Essentially the different components of technique, what they are, how we can manipulate them to maximize hypertrophy, as well as propose a more official definition. Obviously, nothing that we don't know already as far as practice goes, but having it out there as a base for future research, because we identify some of the potential gaps. For example, and that's another study that will take place in the summer. This counts as me pre-registering it, by the way, for the internet cloud. Obviously,
this probably won't be out until 2024 in the beginning of the year. So I think you'll be safe as long as you guys register.
Awesome. So we want to actually look at whether the involvement of other muscle groups when performing resistance training, i.e., non-strict technique, how that compares with strict technique as far as hypertrophy goes. Now, this is a bit tricky, and obviously the methods of that paper have not been crafted yet, so I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to say exact. Yeah, but I have a feeling that, and obviously, again, methods will dictate my feeling as well, because this is not like a formal hypothesis or anything. But we may be somewhat overstating the importance of keeping things very strict. As far as hypertrophy goes, we shall see, though. We are also working on a study on supersets, and there's a bunch of other projects, including a few meta-analyses that are in the works right now in terms of figuring out the exact topic. There's a lot of cool stuff, man. Lehman, shout out to the whole lab. Shout out to Dr. Schoenfeld as well. AMDL, absolute paradise as far as a collection of like-minded people who love researching all things lifting. And yeah, I'm super excited for the next couple of years. I think a lot of cool stuff will come out, and there's already a bunch of publications either published or in review. So yeah, super cool.
That's super cool. I'm excited.
The elevator pitch from the
I was gonna say the slow elevator
to the 400 Burj Khalifa elevator pitch.
What is so before we super dive into this, one thing I've been really focused on with the few interviews I've done so far is I think it's so important to have a scientific mindset, right? And what I mean by that, Mr. Pinky Out, is being open to adaptation, to not feeling, I talked with a colleague about the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? And how we all get so confident. And I think everybody who's ever lifted before, once they start gaining muscle, is like, I'm obviously fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger here. Like, I've figured this whole thing out. Everybody else is an idiot. Maybe that's just me, but that's kind of what I thought when I was, 17 and started putting on muscle. But you very quickly realize that, some things you're hitting the nail on the head, and other things you were way off base. I'd love to know what's something that recently, within the last few years, you've taken a complete 180 on, that maybe if I'd have asked you 5 years ago, you were pretty dang sure about when it comes to resistance training or just exercise in general.
Wow. You hit me with that. I thought we were going to go more general, and I was ready for that. But that's a solid question. Now, about a complete 180, I'm really trying to think. Definitely agree with you, and that's a huge limitation for some people, and a huge skill.
It doesn't have to be 180 degrees. Maybe it's
I'm thinking. That's true. So I guess the one thing that I've massively changed my mind on um, is definitely coaching. The role of coaching and periodization specifically, and a lot of sort of the idea that meticulous planning, and especially planning ahead, makes a huge difference for gains. But I've also changed my mind in terms of the role, my role and our role as coaches, what that really is and what that really means. Obviously, that's that's linked to science and how my knowledge of the literature and how much we don't know, that has been affected by that. Um, but yeah,
So
it's
meaning you think that periodization might not be as important as you used to think, or
I
it's
think
more
it's a bit of
important.
a I think it's a bit of a buzzword. Like I was having this discussion with a client the other day. I'm not gonna name them, but I'll read the chat out to show you what I mean. Like as far as direct literature, like first of all, what does periodization really mean? In the literature, we only have papers that have looked at different configurations of training protocols for essentially a short period of time. Yeah, those have shown that when it comes to periodized versus non-periodized, you're probably looking at better gains, but that doesn't necessarily prove the concept of periodization and the idea that meticulous, very long-term planning and um, undulating variables in a specific manner is absolutely necessary to maximize gains, or that at least you need to be looking at something relatively complex on paper in order for that to be a solid training program. So I have this client tell me. So he went easiest 290 bench of my life. I haven't deloaded in a long time, but I'm still able to constantly add weight every session, every week. I'm not really understanding that, honestly. Like, how am I still getting these ridiculous gains from the linear periodization you have me doing and not need a deload? And my response was that, is it really linear though? And periodization is a bit of a placebo. Because like our program has alternating rep schemes, but it's like a solid, relatively simple program. And this idea that we need some form of complex system in order to get already strong people to get stronger, I think it's something I changed my mind on. Back in the day, I thought that as a coach, there's all these like little variables that we need to tweak and make sure, when in reality, especially for, I mean, I'm not even going to go to what you guys do. What, like, for that sort of population, as long as you can get people to consistently engage in high effort resistance training, they could do whatever they like. 5 reps, 30 reps, 7 reps, 3 reps. And I work with a lot of Gen Pop as well. So I've realized that for a lot of people, and I'm excluding like strength athletes before a competition, that's where things do get a bit more meticulous, and physique athletes as well. And obviously all athletes, but I don't work with any other athletes. But like for the majority of people that want to get bigger and stronger, and I'm not talking just general health bigger and stronger. I'm talking you're deadlifting well above 4 plates, you're benching 2 plates, maybe 4 reps, and you're squatting 3+ plates at a relatively okay body weight. Um, that's as simple as having like a relatively basic on paper program that follows basic principles, doing that over time, listening, seeing what you prefer, what you don't prefer as far as exercise selection goes, and just being consistent. And whenever you feel completely beat up for a while, taking a few days off, like that's literally it. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
my
love that. I love that topic, and I agree a lot. And I'm sure you know James Steele. I think maybe Fisher was involved in it, but definitely Lineker. They wrote that chapter that's coming out soon in a new textbook that's about this exact topic, about the myth of periodization. And I think it's such a good one because it's so prevalent in our industry,
yeah.
especially in the strength and conditioning space. Like you just hear all like so many variables you have to control, and people forget that. I think at the end of the day, the thing I always focus on is one, you're talking about Soviet bloc countries, right? Post World War II, where they're literally going, like, this is where all this research initially came from. They're going around and picking out of their homes the people that they think are going to be the best athletes, and then they're training them as the best athletes, and then they're literally injecting them with monstrous amounts of steroids from the time they're like 10 years old, right? So the applicability of that style of periodization to the general population is not much over zero, if even close at all. So I think that's just so important to remember is, everything you laid out there. Like if you work hard consistently over time, you're probably going to achieve the goals that you're looking to get. And it doesn't have to be very complicated. And I think that's part of the negative aspect of our industry in general too, is people think that if they sell somebody a simple program, they're going to think it's not worthy. Like it almost has to be complex for people to feel like, well, obviously this is what LeBron James does. And, all these other athletes that I see, their programs are so complex and they're so multifaceted. And it's like, yeah, but are you LeBron James? Come on, let's be honest here. So anyways, I digress.
No,
okay.
not at all.
So what I really wanted to talk to you about today, Pat, because you are Mr. Minimum Dose trademark 2022, Dr. Pack Minimum Dose. I want to talk to you about volume. And I think this is another topic that, there's just so much misinformation on. There's so much history in the strength and conditioning and resistance training space. People have seen pumping iron. I've got right here, Arnold Schwarzenegger's The New Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, 1,000 sets a week.
The worst book in the history of books. But yeah, we've all had it in a legendary book. If you never bought that book, you're not really a lifter though.
Yeah, for sure. You got to go through and go, God, how do I get that big? But I'd love to just sort of talk about the spectrum of volume, right? Because this is a topic that just creates so much vitriol and hatred in our industry from people on my end of the spectrum. And by my end, I mean like super, and I wouldn't put myself in this camp, but in general, super zealotous, high intensity training, Mike Mentzer, twice a week, Arthur Jones, never do more than, 10 sets of anything in a particular workout, to the far end of the spectrum. We just had this study come out that we're going to talk a little bit more about that was looking at, was it 26 sets for the quads in this study? I've seen.
We'll talk about the details. Like, let's talk about the details of the study rather than this semi-summary. It was a lot of volume for the quads.
But a lot of volume in there. So walk us through that study, and then we can kind of have some dialogue and some back and forth about where the actual research points to, and if there's even a definitive answer of what's best, or if it's more, spoiler alert, just based on your goals and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I honestly don't get why people get so triggered when it comes to volume. I think some of it has to do with this sort of a feeling of being told that, oh, look, you're not working hard enough, you could be doing more. I think that's a weak spot. Keep in mind, right? Selling low volume, so selling somebody the idea that you can do less and make more is the easiest sales pitch ever. And if the data did indeed support that less is more, there is nobody, except maybe a few crazy people, that would be just forcing high volume as a false narrative or whatever, because there is a bit of this, like, high volume is treated as this sort of amazing sales pitch that people have a bias towards, and I'm like, guys, we'll look at the data separately, but also intuitively it doesn't really make that much sense to want to be the guy that's telling people, oh, no, you got to do more if you want to get all like the muscle gains.
I agree with that, but my pushback would be is in general, the people that you see, and this is pure anecdote and just talking on general terms, is like when I think of the traditional high volume bodybuilding guy, it's somebody who has the genetics that puts them in that position where they can manage that volume, right? Where their body can physically recover from, and obviously there's a bell curve here, right? So some people can handle just sets upon sets upon sets and still recover and still build muscle adequately. But then you have the other end of the spectrum that are nowhere near there, right? And they physically cannot, and I train those people as well, do much more than 1, 2, maybe 3 sets per muscle group per week and expect to see anything resembling progress. But it's always struck me, especially since I've come into more of the low volume camp, that the people who are really pushing for high volume, it seems, are the ones that have maybe already been in that camp, right? Because if you start working out and you see results and you do more and you see more results, you never want to flip the switch and maybe think, could I have achieved this with less time or effort or intensity? Does that make sense? Am I just kind of
Yeah.
talking out of my ass, or do you get where I'm going there?
Yeah, I get what where you're going from, but I don't understand why people divide themselves in camps and why there is this idea that, there's some sort of bias or one side wants to be. It shouldn't be sides. This is data. What does the data show? It shows this, the end. Like,
Yeah, I agree with that.
as far as the literature goes, and that's being scientific, because you mentioned that before, right?
Yep.
If the data shows that we need less than X amount of protein, so, and obviously by the data, I mean the totality of the available scientific literature, not 3 studies. It is what it is. The same goes with a lot of stuff, like the keto diets, and like the interference effect of cardio, um, walking and health, and so on and so forth. What does the totality of evidence say? Cool. If we're evidence-based, obviously you're going to take your personal experience, and it's part of the picture as well as the preference of the client. But when it comes to volume, if we look at the totality of available scientific evidence as far as muscle growth is concerned, a handful of sets per week, per muscle group per week, is not enough to maximize muscle hypertrophy. And it's probably that you need more. Not it's probably, that's what the data is demonstrating. So 10 to 20 sets. And we even have studies showing that 30 plus sets may lead to even more growth. Now, for the latter, put an asterisk next to that, we need more data, but it is what it is. Same goes for strength. You can achieve great things with just a handful of sets per week. And we're talking like, that's very little. 10 sets a week, I'd argue, is low volume as well. Because people hear 10 and it's like, it's not that much. Like, if you can get in and get out if your exercise selection is smart enough pretty quickly, especially if you have a home gym, because a lot of people in the United States do train at home. Anyways, I'm rambling now. As far as the current literature on training volume goes, things are pointing towards a dose-response relationship with hypertrophy. Obviously, some people will be able to handle less, will have lower starting volumes. They may need less to make progress. Other people may need more. That's something that is always baked in the statements. So, right, nobody's telling you, hey, everyone needs the exact same training volume to maximize gains. But we're trying to make a general recommendation and eke that out from the literature. And if you're somewhere between 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, it's likely that you're probably close to maximizing your potential hypertrophy gains. But there was this study recently, and this is a study that fits with previous data as well, that have shown that even 30 plus sets, at least under specific conditions per week, per muscle group per week, may lead to even more gains. Where essentially what they did is they had 3 groups. So one group, all groups started at 22 sets for their quads per week. And those sets were distributed in 3 exercises: the squat, the back squat, the leg press, and leg extensions. And one of those groups stayed at 22 sets for the entire duration of the study, which was 12 weeks. Keep in mind, all groups had a 2-week washout period where they did a lower volume, actually, where they essentially didn't train with high volumes. Then they had a familiarization week, 2 familiarization weeks, where they started getting used to training with higher volumes. Keep in mind, this was just for their quads, okay? It wasn't their whole body, just for their quads. And then they were split into 2 groups. One group stayed at 22 sets for their quads for the entire study for 12 weeks. So for 3 months, that's what they did. The other group added 4 sets distributed, allocated differently for each exercise, not 4 sets per exercise, just 4 total sets for quads. They added 4 sets every 2 weeks.
Is this the totality of the sets per week, correct? Not per workout? So this is
Per
split
week,
over.
per week.
Okay.
So they started at 22 sets, and every 2 weeks they added 4 sets. And then you had another group that added 6 sets every 2 weeks. They ended up doing 52 sets of quads during the last 2 weeks, split into yeah. I agree. I personally, I'm doing a few singles per week for quads, literally 3 singles. Same for the deadlift. So, anyways, they ended up doing 52 sets for their quads, split in 2 sessions of 26 sets per session during the last 2 weeks. what the authors found was, and that's surprising. They tested strength, somewhat surprising actually. They tested strength via 1RM on the squat, and the groups that did more sets, so that progressed every 2 weeks, the more sets they added every 2 weeks, the more strength gains they saw. So the group that ended up doing 52 sets per week saw the greatest strength gains, 1 repetition maximum strength gains. Now, it's important to note that as far as average squat sets go, those were around 13 to 18 for the groups that were adding sets. So keep in mind that that's somewhat in line with the current literature as far as training volume and strength go. Not completely in line, but we do have data showing that higher training volumes may lead to higher strength, although that sort of upper limit happens earlier than for hypertrophy. So I'm not sure, and we don't know a lot about how like the leg press can potentially potentiate 1RM strength for the squat. So, I cannot say that they were just squatting. Maybe those extra sets also helped, but terms of conditions apply, we don't really know yet. And as far as hypertrophy goes, although the authors noted no statistically significant difference, if you actually look at the data, the group that did 52 sets did experience more hypertrophy to an extent that I think would be meaningful as far as in practice goes. But what's also important to note is that, because a lot of people also talk about the concept of junk volume, even if somebody says, okay, they were not statistically significant, I'm gonna sort of throw those results out of the window, which would be wrong, but let's say they do. The people that were doing 52 sets at the end of the study, and an average of 37 sets for their quads per week, still made gains and didn't lose gains. Because a lot of people fear that, if I do more, I'm gonna overtrain, overdo it. It's junk volume. And we are seeing somewhat consistently in the literature that that's not really the case.
Was that for everyone in that higher training group, or were there outliers where there's somebody who saw greater hypertrophy and then somebody actually did atrophy? And how many participants are we talking about roughly? I don't care if you actually have all this right in front of you.
I had it.
If you do.
Reviewed on the latest issue of Reps as well. So one person did lose size, and there were no. Just let me confirm, so I'm not chatting a load of BS. So, and as far as outliers, there wasn't anything insane in any of the groups. But keep in mind that, sorry, that was the squat strength. Yeah, keep in mind that in many studies you'll see like the random participant here. It doesn't matter. Overall, as a group, they made exceptionally better strength gains and also saw more hypertrophy. So if you look specifically at the effect sizes reported. Now, as far as people per group go, and obviously, again, this is one study. So they had 37 participants that were split in the 3 groups. And at the end of the study, just because I mentioned it, the constant set group did 8 sets of squats, 8 sets of leg press, 6 sets of leg extensions. The 4 set group did 14 sets of squats, 14 sets of leg press, 14 sets of leg extensions, and the 6 set group did 18 sets of squats, 18 sets of leg press, and 16 sets of leg extension. So that was their weekly volume at the end of the study.
Was that split over 2 sessions, 3, 4?
2. Yeah.
Oh,
They also, still blah. But keep in mind, they only did quads. They were free to do their own upper body training, and they also did a couple of exercises for hamstrings at a lower volume afterwards. So it's important to understand that this was not a study where people did 52 sets per muscle group per week for 12 weeks, but rather did quads only and then added volume. 2 groups added volume as time passed. They had a familiarization session before. These were trained individuals with like a mean a REM for the squat around 140 kilos, if I'm not mistaken, so close to 315 pounds. So they were not Ronnie Coleman, but they were solid. There were people that definitely lifted weights. And yeah, it was a really cool study. This doesn't mean you should do 52 sets per week for your muscle groups or 37. It was just cool to see that you can potentially do even more and still see hypertrophy gains, or at least not regress. And there's a
Could this be an issue of, if we want to go back to like periodization, functional overreaching? Maybe would be how you would apply that, and then just say this is maybe not applicable, like realistically long term. Like, do you think somebody could do 52 sets a week for 52 weeks a year and expect to see continual growth, or is it possible with that 2 week washout period that this was just um, just that sort of gave them the ability to have that sort of functional overreach, and if you want to use that terminology?
I don't know. I don't know if they could keep that up for a long time, but functional overreaching and just I it I don't know. I cannot tell you. I think this study lends itself well to specialization phases, where if you have a muscle group that you really want to bring up, you have some literature showing you that, hey, you can go above 20 sets per week. You don't need to go directly to 52 sets or 37 or whatever, but you could potentially do even more and potentially see some more growth. And it's just an interesting it just allows us to better understand to start understanding hypertrophy and the relationship with volume a bit better. This is not supposed to provide the ultimate answer or just convert you into a high volume freak. And I do think that 52 sets per week, it's probably not manageable for the majority of people out there consistently for very long periods of time. Now, 52 sets for some muscle groups specifically, and if somebody's really determined and they are conditioned to do these sorts of volumes, and they said, okay, for this one muscle group, I'm really going, like, I'm going to give it my everything. I think some people could pull it off for a good few months. A good few months, again, with all the terms and conditions, managing all their other training volume, and like really wanting to get those sets in. Now, for super strong power lifters doing 52 sets of 18 sets of squats per week, I mean, we've seen some people do 18 sets of squats per week, but then adding the leg press and leg extension on top, I don't know if it would go down well, but this is just speculation. Sorry, let me just say this again, because like people absolutely lost their shit with this study. You have people going through military training, like special forces and stuff, doing the absolutely unimaginable feats of strength and like no sleep, constantly just doing stuff for days on days on days, and they managed to do it. Like people couldn't believe that a bunch of people, trained individuals, in a lab, and in the lab doesn't mean a bunch of lab coats around them. When I'm in the lab, I'm just myself, and we're there pushing participants, telling them, "Come on, one more." Like they took a bunch of people, they did only quads for 3 months, built up to crazy volumes, and had 4 sessions that were absolutely killer sessions. But people do ultra marathons and Ironman and stuff. Like I don't get how this is so extreme.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think keeping the bigger picture in mind is super helpful, because I read this and my red flags go up, and it's not on purpose, right? It's just how I've been conditioned to think about volume in general, and it's something that I have to consistently work on too, because it's hard to argue at this point in my career that if you want to maximize, and that I think that's a super important word there, maximize or optimize hypertrophy, you're going to have to do more volume than a traditional, lower volume, high intensity training approach. Now, that doesn't mean long term you might not see really great, impressive increases in hypertrophy and strength over the long term, right? But I think having the ability to understand this, not get super inflamed and triggered, like you said, right? And think of how to interpret this to your clients. So if somebody does come to you and say, "Oh, Pack, what the fuck are we doing, man? We're only doing 5 sets of quads. I should be doing 52 sets of quads according to this study." You can rationally talk them down from that and say, no. This was a 12-week period, right? Like this was a specific muscle group that we're looking at. Hey, if you want to build your quads, we can talk about, creating a period of where we're doing this. But this is not something that's probably realistic for doing for every single muscle group every single week. We're not going to be doing 1,000 sets per week. It looked like you had something to add there.
No. I totally agree. And the authors didn't say that. If you read the actual paper, the authors are even downplaying the hypertrophy results of the study and advise for caution. But do also mention that, hey, maybe the limit for volume is somewhat higher than we previously thought. And for me personally, as a coach with a client, I had a client recently say, hey, I think I can do more chest. And I was like, okay, we shall do more chest. Let's add a few more sets here and there. See how your session RPEs change over the next couple of weeks, how you're feeling, how sore you're getting. If you say you can do more, we'll add more. We know that it's not going to lead to deleterious effects if you have the time and you're willing to make that educated bet, because that's what you're doing essentially. You're making a semi-educated bet on potentially getting more gains. But people also need to understand that optimal and suboptimal is, and will this be on video or just audio? So for
Oh, it's
those,
just audio. Yeah.
okay, so nobody's watching. So just imagine like optimal may mean 100%, suboptimal may mean 95 or 85. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
mean 10. Like suboptimal can still be something that the majority of people that are
And
not
I like to use the word sufficient, right? Like when I'm explaining this to people, I like to say optimal, like optimization versus sufficiency, right? And for the average person, and I hate to cut you off there, but I want to get this thought out too. I think, yeah, I do. Obviously, I let you spend 20 minutes just pumping yourself up. No, I think we're in my industry specifically a little influenced by the people we work with, right? And we're very protective of these people that come to us that are Gen Pop. That typically, let's be honest, the average person who's coming to see a personal trainer is probably not Ronnie Coleman. Right now, Ronnie Coleman may have a training partner, but he's probably not coming to, a 190-pound weakling like me to see how to maximize his gains, right? But the grandmother that I work with that's 75 years old that, has never lifted a weight in her entire life, I understand the protective instinct because a lot of people in my industry, in my, my colleagues, like people that I know that I work with, are targeting those older individuals, people that have never exercised before. And we're very protective of this idea that, like, no, we're not going to have Grandma Joe doing, 1,000 sets per week. Like, this article is crazy. I have to fight against it and backlash and all those things. So, like, I understand that instinct, but I think we have to be more scientific. And I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying I understand.
No, I don't understand it either, though. But like, do they go the same about like aerobic exercise data or people doing sports? Like, do they get mad that, hey, no chance these NFL players are doing or like these combat athletes are training 6 times a week? The grandma can do it. I don't get the logic.
Yeah.
And it's like, as far as the literature goes, it's only positive things about low volume resistance training. It's only health benefits, 60 minutes per week to maximize risk reduction for all-cause mortality, even like low RPE, 1 set per week, like is enough to do at least something. It's getting its props. Low volume training, it's getting its flowers, and relatively low volume training can work wonders for making really solid muscle gains as well. It's just not enough to optimize things.
And I think that's where the line in the sand is that we want it to be our, and I'm speaking broadly, and obviously I should be speaking for an entire industry, right? But we think it's our way or the highway, right? And to, I feel like, and I've been guilty of this, of just sometimes we want to stick our head in the sand and go, no, high volume, la 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 la, can't do it, right? It's got to be, my way or the highway kind of thing. And to ignore this stuff that's coming out, I think it's ludicrous, right? We need to be open to it and understand it and realize that this is what the data is saying, whether we like it or not. Like, this is what the data is saying. And we can choose to interpret it, falsely, but I think it's better to have conversations with our clients of going, okay, we could add some more volume. Like you said, you want to target your chest. That's an area that's lagging for you. Yeah, let's take out that set of, calf raises that you don't care about and add in, a couple extra sets of chest press or pec fly or whatever it might be. So,
exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that point. And doing your job as a coach too, right? I think is important, and actually, listening to the person in front of you. So let's transition from this and go into a little less scientific. How much should we be doing? what is the least we can get away with? What is the most we can get away with? And I know we've kind of touched on the spectrum there, but give me some sort of solid numbers, and we can use that 52 sets at the high end for a single muscle group. But in general, what is that range that people should be looking for? That's like, okay, well, I don't want to spend 3 hours plus a week in the gym. I'd like to spend, an hour or less if possible. What are the realistic options for somebody that's looking to get maybe a little muscle growth, definitely wants to get stronger and see some of those health benefits that come from resistance training?
So let's break it down in three categories. I'm freestyling here, so I may need to correct the thing here, here and there. So the first category is the type of individual that wants to gain muscle, gain strength, improve their health, see some aesthetic changes, some visual differences in how their physique looks, but is not really fussed about either maximizing strength or hypertrophy gains, or becoming necessarily somebody who will be jacked or like a gym rat. Okay, this is somebody who who is on top of their shit, pardon my French, and it's like, look, I need to do resistance training. It will help my life. It will make me look somewhat better. And it will help my health, make me look somewhat better. And in general, it's just associated only with positive outcomes. So I have to do it. I don't care to dive into the culture, the lifting. I'm just doing it because I want some gains. 1 to 3 sets per muscle or per lift for strength per week, at around 5 to 12. Like, you could go higher as far as reps, but like as a general guideline, staying somewhere between 5 to 12 reps and being close or very, very close or to the point of momentary muscular failure. So to the point where you're actually attempting to do another repetition and you fail to do so, that will be enough for you to make meaningful gains as far as hypertrophy and strength go. But it's likely, unless you're a genetic freak, that you're not going to be turning heads when you walk in the bar as far as size goes. You will look like somebody who is on top of their fitness, their health, and is way stronger and way more muscular than the average individual. Now, the second category is the individual who still doesn't care about becoming the absolute freak or maximizing strength or hypertrophy, but still wants to look jacked and be like a lifter, if I want to put it scientifically. In that category, if you're somewhere
Very
between
scientific.
exactly 6 to 10 sets per muscle group or per lift per week, you're looking at probably making even more gains, and in terms of both muscle and strength. Still probably not absolutely maximizing both, but just adding those few sets, you're essentially doing more than double the training volume, but it's still not that much. You're looking at really solid strength and hypertrophy increases. And if you're a genetic freak, you're going to be definitely looking like it as well. But that's those sort of volumes, I think, for a lot of people can work wonders, and they can actually allow them to get to the point where they will have a relatively impressive physique, even for people that do go to the gym.
I may have missed the last piece. Was the rep range and the
I didn't mention that.
reserve the same? Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, look, I'd say again, if you're somebody who wants to maximize strength, to make really solid strength gains, and you've become that sort of lifter where you're now looking at your bench, your squat, and you want to get those 1 repetition maximum strength numbers up, combining rep ranges and sort of practicing the test on those lifts and doing, a few singles, doubles, or triples with a heavy weight at like 1 to 4 reps in reserve is your best bet. And then doing all the rest of your work at the 5 to 12, 5 to 20 rep range, very close to or close to failure, using machines, free weights, and so on and so forth. So a combination of both would work great for that individual. If you're just somebody who wants to get generally strong and big, keeping that rep range at 5 to 12 and just making sure you're adding weight over time and staying close to or to failure, you're definitely you're ticking almost all boxes there. And last but not least, the freak category, aka the individuals who care about their side delt looking bigger after 10 years of lifting, and they want to be as big and as strong as humanly possible. Having training in the 10 to 20 set range for each muscle group for hypertrophy makes sense, with some muscle groups if they're lagging, potentially even higher than 20 sets per week, maybe 20 to 30. And as far as strength goes, somewhere between 6 to 12 sets again will be more than enough. So they could either again do a sort of a combination of both. But if they don't care about strength and they just care about hypertrophy, similar sort of guidelines. But that's where it may make sense to play around with different rep ranges on different exercises, maybe look into more advanced training techniques. But as far as volume goes, 12, let's scratch the 10 and say 12 to, because that was the actual guideline, 12 to 25 sets as a general sort of rough volume guideline. But yeah.
Should all of those sets be taken to failure as well when you're again almost doubling the volume there, or should we be looking at more sets with reps in reserve? How would you structure a program like that for somebody who maybe wants to compete or wants to be the next Lane Norton competing at powerlifting or whatever?
Powerlifting specifically, no, we wouldn't be close to failure. But that's powerlifting. Like
let's talk about the general freak then wants to see their side delts, those kind of things. Should they be taking all 25 of those sets per muscle group per week to failure, or does it make sense to do more of a warm up and then some working sets? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say based on the latest evidence on the relationship between failure and hypertrophy, what we see is that the closer you get to failure, the more gains you're getting. At those volumes, I wouldn't say that, hey, make sure every damn set is to failure or you're missing out on gains. But on principle, being very close to failure on most sets where you can do so safely, obviously. Like let's say you're doing a squat, calling it at 8 or 9 RP at like 1 or 2 reps in reserve, make sure that you get out there safely. Makes sense, and you're probably not missing out on much quad hypertrophy if you're also doing, sissy squats to failure and some Bulgarian split squats as well or whatever. But yeah, in principle, that's if you're trying to maximize hypertrophy, that's where things need to be pretty high effort. But again, don't take that as all sets must be to failure, but you need to be very close to or to failure in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are great guidelines just in general. And it really paints the picture of sort of what is your goal and what are you trying to get out of your training. And then I just keep coming back to that idea of optimizing versus what's sufficient for you. What's realistic in your life at this moment? Like, do you have multiple hours per week to commit to the gym? No. Okay. Well, then don't try to commit multiple hours to the week, per the week to the gym, right? Find something that actually works that we know will get you a lot of the benefits, 80, 85, 90, maybe even 95%, depending on how hard you're working. And then if you do go through those periods where life is, less hectic, add in some more training volume. It's not going to kill you, right, to do those things. I think, in my industry and my business specifically, we tend to target people who have extremely hectic lifestyles, but I'm always surprised at how willing they are to, a lot of the people, not all of the clients that I train, but I've got this guy that I've been training. I won't mention his name either, but he recently told me the other day that he's been, after his workouts with us for the last like 3 years, doing another hour and a half of training on his own after he finishes his workout, which to me was like, what?
Boss.
Yeah. But he's just one of those incredibly type A, like super driven, super successful guy, just out of his fucking mind, but in a good way, pardon my French. But he can't comprehend this idea of I should do less and it equals more, right? So why aren't we creating a program that's going to give him a little bit more of what he wants? Like, to me, if you're doing it in a smart way, it doesn't hurt the underlying principles and philosophy of high intensity training, if you want to call it that, when the guy's doing it anyways outside of there. Like, we've obviously not been making a dent in in his thinking, regardless of the education we've been trying to give to him. So why not have him pay us for that and do it in a way that's productive, that he's not going to go hurt himself, where we can have that supervision and all those other things. So any other final thoughts on that?
Yeah, that look, there's this sort of fear of overtraining or overdoing it. You will know if you're overdoing it. And you'll probably overdo it if you go from 0 to 100 real quick. But if you're gradually increasing volume and you're feeling okay, obviously, look, you're going to be sore, and there's going to be days where you're going to feel the workout, right? At the end of the day, you're training and trying to maximize muscle. But don't be afraid that you'll suddenly, get rhabdo and have to face deleterious health consequences because you did a couple more sets. Monitor how you're feeling soreness-wise, how your performance in the gym is, how your sleep is affected, and then adjust accordingly. It's usually like we are in this sort of era of data and just numbers and graphs and whoop band and this and that and the other. Like you waking up and feeling okay and not being extremely sore and still going in the gym and seeing numbers go up without massive changes in your weight or your body weight, that is enough indication that you're fine. So yeah, no need to nocebo yourself that if you do more, it's going to be overtraining FM and you're going to be there unable to recover and you're going to lose muscle.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out for some of our listeners who maybe aren't doing anything right now, because we might have some of those people that aren't training at all, and to realize that there's a first step that you can take, right? And we've certainly seen that before, where if somebody comes to us and they've got no experience, and then they decide that they want to go pursue something like a bodybuilding show or a physique competition that's maybe outside the scope of our practice, I've got colleagues that I can refer them to, somebody who specializes in this area that's maybe a little more familiar with building a program that might be a little more higher volume. But I think knowing that you don't have to go, like you said, from 0 to 100 and get your foot in the door with 52 sets of quads per week. I think if you're antsy about what does my training have to look like to elucidate some of these benefits, it can be pretty dang minimal. And I think that can be very appealing to people who maybe are just worried that, again, exercise is complicated. It has to be periodized. It has to be this really elaborate scheme that we put together. And the theme that I've continued to take away over my time in the industry is, let's just work hard progressively over time. Right. And if you can commit even once a week, ideally twice a week, but at least once a week, get in, do something, work hard and try to build on that over time. You're going to be better off than 90% of the rest of the world, because people are just not doing this. Like it's so ubiquitous for us. This is what we, eat and sleep and breathe. But the reality is that most people are not doing these things. So I think having that low barrier to entry is just super important. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you do? Because the people are dying to know, how do you get traps like that? So I'd love to hear a little bit about your training routine, your schedule. What does Dr. Pak do to say quite so jacked?
So let me just touch on what you just said and address the listeners directly. Doing anything or doing something is definitely better than nothing. And especially as far as resistance training goes, we even have data of like 20 minutes of resistance training per week being enough to see strength increases, and those strength increases maintained, if not slightly increased, over 70 years. As far as health goes, 60 minutes per week is enough to maximize, to significantly decrease the risk of all-cause mortality. You're looking at both psychological and physiological benefits, bone density. I was reading a paper the other day on type 2 diabetes and whether cardio versus lifting weights is better, and lifting weights was better than just cardio in managing type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, I just read that paper as well. Was that the one on the regular weight type 2 diabetes?
Yep. Spot on. Nice, respect. But it's like, there's no reason for you to not do even just a few pull-ups and push-ups at home. Literally anything every week is much better than doing nothing. So, and you're doing a favor to yourself, current and future self. So I like the people that are resistance training at the moment, when they reach a certain age, they're going to be heavily thanking their younger selves for committing to any sort of resistance training. Any modality, any rep range, I will go as far as to say even any intensity. Because like if you're going to do either nothing or some maybe not to failure training where you're just lifting some weight, that's still something that is still enough to at least give you a few of the health benefits. Anyways, done selling resistance training. Your question was on my training. So I train with relatively, so for the deadlift, for example, insanely low volumes, as low as like 1 set per week for years now. And I've managed to maintain it around 630 pounds, which is great. And I'm talking like some
He
weeks.
didn't have to do kilos in that one because he tells every American that he meets how much he does in pounds in the deadlift.
Cool, bro. To be honest, I'm working mostly with Americans. So I've gotten used to pounds. But when training in the US, things still get a bit weird. But I also go to a gym when I'm in New York that has kilos. Shout out JDI Barbell. Anyways, my own training is mostly hypertrophy focused. The deadlift I've kept as like an exercise that I enjoy getting stronger on. Obviously, with super low volumes, such as the ones that I'm doing now, because I'm not entirely fast about pushing it at the moment. It's somewhat stagnated, but again, I've managed to maintain it at a relatively solid, weight for, and I hit a few small PRs in the past years with like a set per week, sometimes even like a single repetition per week. As far as everything else, that's the same for my quads as well. At the moment, I'm doing just a few singles of squats per week with a goal of being able to squat 500 pounds high bar on any day. And the rest, I am hitting relatively hard as far as intensity of effort goes. All my sets are to failure, including like failure beyond the point of being able to do partials at long muscle lengths. So I try to reach the point where I'm unable to do any sort of rep with a weight. But as far as volume goes, I am somewhere between 6 to 12 sets per muscle group per week. I train completely YOLO as far as like there's no plan, some basic principles. And I've been doing so for the past few years. And I've been hitting PRs on obviously everything else when it comes to like lat pull downs, bicep curls, all the exercises I do have been steadily going up. And I've been also specializing in the overhead press, where I overhead press 4 to 5 times a week. And I recently hit an all-time PR of 225 pounds for one. But a strict rep, no sleeves, no leg drive whatsoever, and no stretch reflex. So it's one of those PRs where you gotta, no wind, no breakfast. I was tired, but that's how the overpress goes.
You're the technique subject, is what you're saying. Is you're the guy that everybody's going to be studying for that technique paper coming out.
No, not really, but yeah.
So when you say YOLO on that, are you literally just, you have an idea of the muscle groups you're going to train that particular day, and you're just going in and based on where you're at, you're going to do those sets on the machines or the dumbbells or the equipment you have available? Or is it literally just however you feel when you walk in the door, that's what I'm doing that day?
There's a very rough structure but I just go based on the volume guidelines, and I keep exercises pretty consistent. So I don't do different exercises. But like in New York, for example, we were training with a friend, Dr. Milo Wolf, new doctor, real doctor, not a physician. And our training consisted of, okay, should we do upper body today? Cool. We had this little game where we would try and max out certain machines. So we would put obviously do a couple of warm-up sets and then try and do the most of the full stack. But for example, today I was in a good mood, and I've been to the gym like 3 or 4 days in a row, and I was like, okay, let's go gym again. Not with my jeans on, walked in, and I did 1 set of overhead press to failure, 5 reps on 80 kilograms. Then I moved to the chest supported machine row and did 2 sets to failure with a whole stack for as many reps as I could. I think it was like 6 to 10. Then I did some lat pull downs, same concept again, a couple of sets to absolute failure. 2 sets of overhead tricep extensions, again, to total failure. And then I finished with some lateral raises, again, a few sets to absolute failure. The same concept was yesterday, just slightly different exercises, more for different muscle groups. But especially with all the traveling, it's so nice to know that you don't necessarily need to follow an insanely structured program, and as long as the basics are there, so volume, intensity of effort, and you're not doing like random exercise and you're keeping things pretty consistent, even if you're mixing and matching and doing a bit more, especially at my stage now where I'm not entirely fussed about maximizing hypertrophy, and I just enjoy training and getting in the gym and like pushing myself and still hitting, PRs and thinking that I am growing. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I love that idea of just, going in and enjoying the gym too. And I think that will be sort of inspirational for people to realize as well that like it doesn't have to be, again, this super structured thing. You hit on a couple of important points that I just want to highlight before we start to wrap this thing up, which is the idea of the volume versus the intensity, which we've touched on intensity a little bit, but not too much in depth today. And I just think it's important to point out that if the intensity isn't high enough, it doesn't really matter what the volume is. It would be, within reason, right? If we're talking about 10 RIR and you're just going in and you're just doing 3 sets of 10 on something with the same weight forever, you're very quickly going to plateau. You're very quickly going to stop seeing improvements. And I think if that intensity is, go ahead, please interrupt me, correct me.
This is no, I'm not going to correct you. I'm going to say that this is something that we haven't really studied, especially in trained individuals. And and that's an idea that has been put out there by Milo, that we don't really like. I assume that would be the case, but I want to see at, like, let's say we have a 12-week study where people stay at the same, like they start at a specific weight and then they stay at that weight, and then the other group is just trying to progress, whether, and people will say okay, then it becomes a reps in reserve study, but not really, because the aim of the study will be different. Anyways, it gets a bit
Would it be to
complicated.
progress the reps? Because I thought there was a study recently that looked at that where they
No,
had the
I mean,
same
yeah, but
relative
one
volume.
group wouldn't do anything, wouldn't progress, would stay the same. Just
That's
do
what I
this.
mean. I thought there was a study that did that looked at, they kept the reps and the sets the exact same, and then the other group just kept building, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't that a recent study?
but did they stay at the exact, like, at their starting loads and didn't have any sort of progression built in? Usually there is some form of progression.
Maybe there was some progression, but yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, because I'm curious to see whether, if you take like some individuals during 3 or 4 months, and they start and they don't apply the principle of progressive overload, will they plateau? Will they still make some gains? Will they regress? And I don't know. I don't think they would regress and lose muscle, but just, it would be. I'm just curious. I'm not saying it would surprise us, but it would be interesting to see.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. And I think it's, the people I'm thinking of specifically are the ones that I've seen that have come to me that go, I've been doing the same workout for 15 years and I haven't progressed the weights, right? Like I show up at the YMCA and I do my, my set of bicep curls with the 25s, and I do 3 sets of 10, and then I do my, tricep whatever with the 3 sets of 10. And it's like, yeah, just I haven't seen any growth. It's like, you've been doing that for 15 years with the exact same weight and rep scheme and everything. So those are sort of the people I was talking about.
No. And I agree. And I think that if you're not progressing, it's likely that you're not going to be making a ton of progress. But I don't know, investigating the concept directly is something that would be cool.
So the last thing I want to pick your brain on here a little bit, and this could be too big of a rabbit hole, and maybe we'd have to do a different podcast on this altogether. But I'm just thinking, and again, I don't have any research that I've seen that would show this, but just anecdotally, and then what I've seen, even, I'm thinking of Lane, right? When it comes to the reality of long-term high volume training, it seems that injury risk would become a bigger issue. Just in the sense of, again, and I'm totally speaking, terms and conditions apply here, right? But in my 6.5, almost 7 years in the fitness industry, I've never seen an injury from the style of training that I participate in studio, right? In front of me, somebody getting hurt doing a set. I have seen so many freaking injuries from people doing, YOLO lifting. And I know that's obviously different than your sort of YOLO lifting, but do you think there's ever going to be a study that would look at that, or is that something for people to consider? Am I completely off base because there's no science that looks at it, or is there some papers? I'm just thinking about long-term longevity and the ROI for people when they're thinking about creating a program. Should they take that, into consideration of, are they maybe doing some damage on joints, connective tissues, things like that? What are your thoughts on that?
So we don't have any direct evidence that explores high volume resistance training and injury. We can look at the dropout rates of the study, the 52 sets, the group the group that ended up doing 52 sets. So the highest volume group actually had the lowest dropout rate. I think it was one person, or it was low in general, but the lowest was in that group. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily tell us a ton, but at least, hey, it seems like those people didn't get injured, and the person that dropped out, I think they state the reason, and it wasn't an injury. As far as looking at, let's say, powerlifting and bodybuilding injury prevalence, and cool, these are sports with people training pretty hard. You often see high volumes as well. And in comparison to other sports, injury rates are pretty low, especially in bodybuilding. And you can make the assumption that on average, bodybuilders don't train with insanely low volumes, probably not doing 37 sets per week. But I would bet on, the average being 12 plus sets for bodybuilders, right? That's the other thing. But overall, again, it is unlikely, like, you're going to be getting feedback from your body and how you're feeling if you're overdoing it consistently. I know there are people out there that like it so much that they ignore those signals. And obviously, okay, listening to your body is a whole nother topic, and how, that may not necessarily be true. And I don't mean that, oh, you feel tired, deload and lose your mind. But when we're talking about injury and pain, it will be clear when you're overdoing it, and it won't all of a sudden go from, oh, okay, now you've overdone it and you're unable to walk. Again, as long as you're being reasonable, right? And you're not doing anything insane, and you're not pushing past pain and having 9 out of 10 soreness and forcing yourself to go to the gym and taking a bunch of pre-workout and just doing sets on sets on sets.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very scientific and logical approach to it. I guess my thought was more based around kind of the note you had made earlier too, right? About ultra endurance athletes, right? This was something that was not even a thing basically 15 years ago. Ultra endurance races were like super rare. Maybe there was one or two going on across the country. Now they're in places like, why would they have 100-mile race there? It's the middle of nowhere, right?
Shout
So
out to the middle of nowhere.
yeah, but I think of those people now who are saying, like, obviously I'm healthy, I'm running 100 miles, but what are the long-term consequences that they're going to see down the road? And I sort of think about my clients, I think about myself when it comes to maybe applying some of these ideas of training more and more. The analogy I heard early on was, treating your joints like a door hinge, right? You may have 10 million openings and closings of a door hinge. And I think it might have been James Fisher that used this analogy, and I'm probably murdering it, but something along these lines, right? Now you're fine up to opening and closing 10 million, but as soon as you get to 10 million and one, you have an injury, right? So are you risking the potential of getting there earlier, right? And who knows, if you're doing this sort of high volume training in your 20s, what it's going to look like at your 70s. So I guess that's sort of my interest, is as resistance training becomes more popular. And again, I would never want to turn anybody off from resistance training, because I think the health benefits greatly outweigh, all the negative health consequences. Like, I think if you blew out your knees, it's worth it compared to going down the road of having type 2 diabetes and all those other negative health consequences that the average person is going to deal with, over the course of the next 50 years. And I'm kind of rambling at this point, but just something to think about. Is this something where we're sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul down the line? And I think you've got a very logical thought process on it, but it's something I bounce around in the back of my head from time to time, is, should I embrace that lower volume, just with the idea that maybe this will allow me to continue to do this and continue to go to the gym and YOLO lift for many decades to come. So
Yeah,
any
I think, I
go
think
ahead.
that again, if like, okay, then this is like anecdotal, but if we look at, I think the individuals who are at that risk are people that are like iron enthusiasts who will push things and will still chase those PRs. And that's myself included to a certain extent. But unless you're like really, really pushing the intensity and the volume simultaneously, I don't know if that's true. It may be true that you may be at a higher risk of whatever, of like wear and tear on your joints. Um, but at the same time, yeah, you'd have to be doing that pretty consistently and pretty intensely. At least that's where my hunch is. And I think that people naturally, especially those that are not competitive bodybuilders or strength athletes, naturally deviate to lower volumes as they age. There's, families get involved. Training is not such a priority as it was back in, their early 20s or 30s. So they'll still hit the gym, but it's not this, okay, 5-6 times a week of like sets on sets on sets. And it kind of naturally deviates to a much more chilled out version of strength training. Obviously, there's exceptions, right? And this is just an observation and an assumption I'm making. But yeah, still lift your weights, maybe not overdo it, and you're gonna be more than fine.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on this point plenty of times at this point, which is just listening to your body, right? And seeing how you're adjusting and adapting to your training and being smart when it comes to, hey, I probably shouldn't push it today, and I'm going to back it off, and maybe I should decrease my volume and some of those things. So I'd love to wrap this up, Pak. I mean, I know you're probably going to be up till like 5 a.m. where you are, but I don't want to take too much more of your time. I think some really great stuff here, and some things I just want to highlight is periodization, probably garbage. I mean, I'm speculating.
No. Let's not call it garbage. Periodization, if you're just somebody who wants to get bigger and stronger and you're not a competitive athlete, probably not as important as you may think. And what does that even really mean? What does periodization even really mean? Sorry, I'll throw the disclaimers for you.
Oh, okay. Terms and conditions apply. Anyways, if you want to, when it comes to maximizing hypertrophy, it's important to think about what your goals are, right? Do you actually want to be the next Mr. Olympia, or do you just want to feel a little bit better? And when it comes to feeling a little bit better versus that Mr. Olympia goal, what are some takeaways clients can have, listeners can have to apply to their own training? I love those 3 groups that you created. That person that just wants to increase strength, muscle, health, maybe some aesthetics, 1 to 3 sets per muscle group per week, staying in that 5 to 20 rep range, getting close to failure. You're going to get some really, really awesome results, very meaningful, probably not optimal. The second group doesn't want to be just healthy, right? They want more aesthetics, 6 to 10 sets per muscle group per week. Same rep range, that 5 to 20 rep range, working close to failure. And then if you want to just be, the next C bum, you absolutely want to be a total freak, big and strong as possible. Maybe look into getting some PEDs, probably would help too. But from a volume perspective, you're probably looking at 12 to 25 sets per week per muscle group, 5 to 20 rep range. Maybe some of those sets not quite all the way to failure, but in general, working with a pretty high level of intensity. Is there anything else I missed there from a volume perspective that you think our listeners would want to take away?
No, not really. I love though the going from discover strength, nice and composed, to suggesting people commit federal crimes on the Exercises Bullshit podcast, where people are advised to get PEDs. But no, joking aside, spot on.
You can get PEDs legally, Pak. All right,
in the
Mr.
U.S.
Yeah. I mean, it probably is not going to be trend, but you could probably get, some TRT or some hormones from your doctor. Yeah.
Well said.
On the spectrum.
I recommend meth for anybody who wants to maximize hypertrophy gains.
Terms and conditions apply. Hey, it's probably not going to hurt your intensity of your workout.
Let's not dig deeper here and try to. There's this cool paper that they did a sort of like a paper to demonstrate that you can actually twist the literature to support anything you like, and it's called, this is on PubMed, cigarette smoking, an underused tool in high performance endurance training. and it's just like trying to create a case for smoking. So yeah, that's us next year with our crystal meth
Yeah.
paper. All right, you hit the nail on the head. Volume, just do your sets, guys, and just don't lose your mind if high volume ends up indeed being better than lower volumes for hypertrophy in the long run.
Yeah, and I think different phases of your training career in your life too are important to consider, right? Think about, what are you trying to accomplish, right? I think if there's any big takeaway here, it's think about what you're trying to accomplish, and then build your goals and your program around that. Pac, tell people where they can find out more about you. Obviously, everyone should subscribe to Reps. Everyone should hop on the wait list. If you want to jump to the top of the wait list for Pac's training, you can buy him a brand new Daytona Rolex.
That would be you can jump. You can jump on much more than just the wait list with a Rolex Daytona. And by that I mean on top of other wait lists. But no, joking aside, at the moment, at the moment you can find more info about me at drpak.com, drpak.com. I'm on Instagram at drpak, drpak, and all my links are there. All our research is there. And if you have any
What's your
questions,
new
please.
YouTube channel as well? If people
That's
want to
true.
check that.
It's Dr. Pack on YouTube as well. Obviously, I know Doctor is cringe, but look, guys, my name is Pak Androulakis Korakakis. I ain't marketing myself with that or just Pack. Imagine now the SEO for Pack. You type Pack in on YouTube and you get all sorts of things besides myself.
Yeah, but it's a PAK for anybody that wasn't following along with that. So DRPAK, just type that into Google. You'll find a bunch of fun stuff. And then if you want to learn more about Dr. Pac's rap career, that's for a different podcast. So we won't have to touch on that today. But thank you so much for joining me, man. It's been really fun. This is like the third time we tried to get on the line together. So I'm glad it finally worked out. It's always a pleasure sitting down and chatting with you.
Likewise, and I love how you're still cosplaying the pensioner with jumping on the line here.
Bam. You. So, I still hold up a fake phone like this. Are you one of these kids? You do this thing with your hands?
What is that?
That's what, if you ask like I don't even know what they call the kids nowadays, like Gen Z, millennials, whatever. But if you ask them like, what do you do for a phone? They just hold their like iPhone, like their fake iPhone.
Really?
They don't do this anymore. Yeah.
Crazy.
So, yeah, we're old. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, probably cut that last part out. I appreciate you listening to the Exercises Bullshit podcast, and we'll be back again next week with some more. Thanks everyone.
Peace.